I got this information, and it had been emailed out to a lot of people and everyone was sharing it, but we can't verify where it came from. So take this with a big grain of salt. But I thought the email was very interesting because basically everything we see happening in places like Canada, this email makes a lot of sense that this is what they're going to do. So we can't verify, I haven't verified who wrote this email. And obviously whoever wrote it wouldn't want themselves to be known if they were real, because they're exposing basically treasonous crimes being done by the Canadian government. But just the info in it, I'm going to talk about it because it's very interesting info and it makes total sense that this could be the next steps. So it apparently comes from someone who's in the Liberal Party of Canada, which is Justin Trudeau's party. It says, I want to provide you some very important information. I'm a committee member within the Liberal Party of Canada. I sit within several committee groups, but the information I'm providing is originating from the Strategic Planning Committee, which is steered by the Prime Minister's office. I need to start off by saying that I'm not happy doing this, but I have to. As a Canadian, and more importantly, as a parent who wants a better future not only for my children, but for other children as well, the other reason I'm doing this is because roughly 30% of the committee members are not pleased with the direction this will take Canada, but our opinions have been ignored and they plan on moving forward toward their goals. They've also made it very clear that nothing will stop the planned outcomes. This person says the roadmap and aim was set out by the Prime Minister's office and is as follows. Phase in secondary lockdown restrictions on a rolling basis, starting with major metropolitan areas first and expanding outward, expected by November of this year. So right there, they've already begun to do that in Ontario and Quebec. So that's very believable that they've already begun to do that. Daily new cases of the COVIDs will surge beyond capacity of testing, including increases in COVIDs-related deaths following the same growth curves, expected by end of November 2020. Well, that one's interesting. Basically, we're back into the flu season, and I've been expecting, and totally expecting, this is what most governments are going to do, is say it's the next wave. So not too surprising there. But kind of interesting that they already know this is going to happen, right? Very interesting. Could it be that they're actually doing it? Rush the acquisition of or construction of isolation facilities across every province and territory, expected by December 2020. Well, that one's interesting because there's a member of parliament in Ontario province named Randy Hillier, and he brought up in parliament that the government is putting out requests, requests for work on basically developing or building what do they call them? Internment centers, basically. So here's the actual video of him talking about it. So again, this is the third point that's already we know is happening. First, he asked the question about what is the plan for these internment centers, and a typical politician, his first answer does not answer it whatsoever. So, politicians. Like, why does anyone even listen to them? So he asks again, and the second time, the guy doesn't answer, and they cut off his microphone and just say, next question.
Next question, the member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Premier. In my supplemental question yesterday, I asked this government if the people of Ontario should prepare for internment camps. In September, the federal government posted a call for expressions of interest for contractors to supply, provide and manage quarantine isolation camps throughout every province and every territory in Canada. These quarantine isolation camps, however, are not limited to people with COVID, but provide a wide latitude for many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built, and how many people does this government expect to detain?
Question. Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker. It is very true that when people leave the country and when they come back in, that the province is suggesting, and the federal government, in cooperation with the federal government, we are suggesting that people isolate themselves. That has been a practice that has been very successful, not only here in the province of Ontario, but across Canada. And we will, of course, be redoubling our efforts to make sure that the people of the province of Ontario remain safe, Mr. Speaker. So if the member is referring to the fact that that one of the public health policies is that when you return from a jurisdiction outside of the province of Ontario or from another country, that you isolate yourself for 2 weeks, I would suggest that has been a good policy that has been working. In fact, this House has been doing the same thing since we came back. We are working in cohorts to make sure that the Legislative Assembly can continue to operate. That's why we have 2 separate cohorts, Mr. Speaker.
Response.
And with the cooperation of the official opposition, that is why all members of the Independents have been excluded from that cohort, because we want them to be able to participate in debate. So we will continue to do everything in our power to make sure that this House continues, but that the people of the province of Ontario and Canada are kept safe.
Supplementary question.
Again, back to the Premier. Here's the RFP, and in the RFP it uses clear language to express that these camps can be used for a broad spectrum of people, not limited to travellers. Indeed, it doesn't even mention international travellers. It's just a broad latitude of people. And I'll send over the copy of the RFP after. So your government must be in negotiations and aware of these plans to potentially detain and isolate citizens and residents of our country in our province. So, Speaker, to the Premier, where will these camps be built? How many people will be detained? And for what reasons? For what reasons can people be kept in these isolation camps? And I'd like to have the Premier assure the people of Ontario.
Member, take a seat. The next question.
Then the next one is complete and total secondary lockdown, much stricter than the first and second rolling phase restrictions, expected by end of December 2020 or early January. And again, I'm expecting that as well. They're going to use the flu season as you know, we put on our last video. In Canada, every year there's like 20 to 50,000 people who get a test for the flu and have the flu. This year there was 6. It goes on, reform and expansion of the unemployment program to be transitioned into the universal basic income program expected by Q1 of next year. So in just 3 or 4 months. Again, they've been talking about universal basic income for a while, so that wouldn't be all that surprising either. Then, interestingly, it says a projected COVID-19 mutation and or co-infection with secondary virus referred to as COVID-21, leading to a third wave with much higher mortality rates and a higher rate of infection expected by February 2021. Wow. So if this is true, they already know there's going to be something new and it's going to be more deadly. Well, I've said this for a while, and we're not on YouTube anymore, so I can actually say it. I used to say Cinco Hey all the time. There's a lot of evidence that they can just turn up the 5G, and it actually causes all the symptoms that they say is what this COVID is. So could it be that they're just going to start turning up the 5G in the first quarter of next year and say it's this new COVID-21? Well, the Pentagon has already put out dishing out $600 million in contracts for 5G dual-use experimentation at 5 U.S. military sites, including to aid lethality. Firms selected for the project include telecoms, AT&T, Nokia, and Ericsson, intelligence and infotech contractor Booz Allen Hamilton, the research wing of GE Research, and a subsidiary of aerospace giant General Dynamics. One effort spearheaded by AT&T at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada will apply 5G to distributed command and control systems in order to aid in airspace and cyberspace lethality, enhancing communications for mobile command centers in combat scenarios. So there's the pentagram talking about how they want to use 5G to increase lethality. So this document goes on further and says daily new cases of the COVID-21 now, hospitalizations and COVID-19 and COVID-21 related deaths will exceed medical care facilities capacity expected in the first and second quarter of next year. Would not be surprised at all if they're already planning for this, that's probably going to be the 5G, or they could be releasing something by various means, but very interesting if this is true, they're already basically planning for it. Then it continues, enhanced lockdown restrictions, referred to as third lockdown, will be implemented. Full travel restrictions will be imposed, including inter-province and intercity, expected second quarter of 2021. Well, we've already seen that in numerous places. In Australia in particular, they cut down everything. You couldn't do anything. They still can't really. So that wouldn't be all that surprising. Transitioning of individuals into the Universal Basic Income program expected in the mid-quarter 2 of next year. Projected supply chain breakdowns, inventory shortages, large economic instability, also expected by the second quarter of next year. So you could see how they could do this. They're already destroying the economy. They're already destroying the food supply chains. It's all Rockefeller plan documents. So you could see the economy completely implode in Canada and many parts of the world, but they're talking about Canada here. And then everyone will be basically have no job, have no money, and then they'll put them all on universal basic income. So basically turn it almost into the Soviet Union. Then it says deployment of military personnel into major metropolitan areas, as well as all major roadways to establish travel checkpoints, restrict travel and movement. Again, they've already been doing that in Quebec and various other parts of the world, including Australia. So then this person says, along with that provided roadmap, the Strategic Planning Committee was asked to design an effective way of transitioning Canadians to meet an unprecedented economic endeavor, one that would change the face of Canada and forever alter the lives of Canadians. What we were told was that in order to offset what was essentially an economic collapse on an international scale, that the federal government was going to offer Canadians a total debt relief. This is how it works. The federal government will offer to eliminate all personal debts, mortgages, loans, credit cards, etc., which all funding will be provided to Canada by the International Monetary Fund under what will become known as the World Debt Reset Program. And they've already talked all about that. The World Economic Forum has talked about the Great Reset. So they're already planning for it. In exchange for acceptance of this total debt forgiveness, the individual would forfeit ownership of any and all property and assets forever. The individual would also have to agree to partake in the COVID-19 and COVID-21 vaccination schedule, which would provide the individual with unrestricted travel and unrestricted living even under a full lockdown, through the use of photo identification referred to as Canada's Health Pass. Committee members asked who would become the owner of the forfeited property and assets in that scenario, and what would happen to lenders or financial institutions. We were simply told the World Debt Reset Program will handle all of the details. Several committee members also questioned what would happen to individuals if they refused to participate in the World Debt Reset Program or the Health Pass or the vaccination schedule. And the answer we got was very troubling. Essentially, we were told it was our duty to make sure we came up with a plan to ensure that would never happen. We were told it was in the individual's best interest to participate. When several committee members pushed relentlessly to get an answer, we were told that those who refused would first live under the lockdown restrictions indefinitely, and that over a short period of time, as more Canadians transitioned into the debt forgiveness program, the ones who refused to participate would be deemed a public safety risk and would be relocated into isolation facilities. Once in those facilities, they would be given two options: participate in the debt forgiveness program and be released, or stay indefinitely in the isolation facility under the classification of a serious public health risk and have all of their assets seized. So as you can imagine, after hearing all of this, it turned into quite the heated discussion and escalated beyond anything I've ever witnessed before. In the end, it was implied by the Prime Minister's office that the whole agenda will move forward no matter who agrees with it or not. That it won't just be Canada, but in fact all nations will have similar roadmaps and agendas. That we need to take advantage of the situations before us to promote change on a grander scale for the betterment of everyone. The members who were opposed and ones who brought up key issues that would arise from such a thing were completely ignored. Our opinions and concerns were ignored. We were simply told just to do it. All I know is that I don't like it, and I think it's going to place Canadians into a dark future. Now, if you remember at the very beginning, this person said that